Hi, this is Nicole Kali, host of Haunted Mid-Atlantic Tales. This is episode 17. It's good to see you again. I was recently on vacation with my family and the Gulf Shores in Alabama, and we had a really great time and celebrated my birthday. I really appreciate everyone that sent loves and blessings and birthday wishes on the 25th and afterwards, because it means so much. And my family actually gave me these flowers, my aunt, who I love very much, and the lights that you see on the background there. I really just want to say once again that June is a very historic month for the African diaspora. In 1960, more than 60 years ago, the Year of Africa is when Madagascar, Mali, was now known as Somalia, the Congo, got freed from European colonialism. That is Belgium, France for Mali and Madagascar, and England for Somalia. If you look at the timeline of resistance against invasion, and especially in terms of anti-Black supremacy on the African continent, it's actually 1,200 plus years old. It was easier, unfortunately, for Africa to be conquered because there's already residual ethnic warfare there. And it did not help that other outside influences came to exploit those differences, which were embraced, but also at the same time acted upon in ways that would take centuries to repair. When the Year of Africa came in 1960, it was to the point that I think we as a people en masse had decided that we have to unite for this common cause. And more than 6 decades later, we are looking at the lasting memory, the scar of what it used to be living under that regime. For the United States, when you look around and when you walk through a lot of what's considered the historic old town districts of different towns, townships, villages, and cities, you may not just encounter the physical evidence of these crimes, the statues, right? The statutes, documents written about it, the historical, retellings. You may encounter the spirit, that kind of imprint. For my family, we talk about it casually. When I was on vacation, my uncle was talking about like, oh yeah, the house that we grew up in was haunted, and I was like, I had a feeling, and it's always just interesting how that's brought up, and then we don't really talk about it much just because it's assumed that everyone knows and has a habit or experience with the supernatural in my grandma's house who passed away. And as for many of you out there, I'm sure it's one of those things that even if it's not spoken, you might have just felt it or experienced or seen it. And from there, it's just a conversation with, I guess, yourself and others about what it was that you saw. For me and my grandma's house when I was growing up, it was always just the feeling of accompaniment, just someone there, like whether it's a relative or another force that I could never really identify. And I think my other family members kind of had the same thing happen to them too. And even when I dream about the house, that presence is kind of still there in the background. And it's hard to tell if that's just a subconscious or not. Or my uncle, another really interesting experience that ties into The Exorcist, because that actually happened in St. Louis and not DC. The building that it initially happened in the hospital that he was taken to is gone. It's just the parking lot now. The memorabilia of that incident, though, were taken to another site, and that's the site where my uncle, when he was patrolling late at night, said that he felt stuff actually being thrown at him, and he thought that it was his other like partner on duty. But then when his partner came to approach him, it was from a completely different direction. It was actually getting darker, and the air was feeling heavier as he was walking and being assaulted with these rocks that he found out, like pebbles hitting him in the shoulder from this like force that we assume followed the memorabilia and just the memory of the incident that would inspire The Exorcist, both the book and the film. It's not just eerie, the power of the mind and how much recurring events can like duplicate themselves and continue even in the afterlife. It's kind of a sign that we do have a true like inner strength to the point that our spirit can leave traces behind and perhaps clues to the lives that they led. So let's get into The Ghost of Virginia. Bring it back to the East Coast. Chapter 68, Southwest Virginia Vignettes. The Spirit Light. Author's note. The following is recounted from Bonnie Ball's delightful narrative, Listen to the Mountain. A woman of her acquaintance told her the following back in the 1930s, almost 100 years ago. Now, during her childhood, she sometimes visited her grandparents who lived in Southwest Virginia. One time, on her first night there, her grandmother tucked her into bed near the front window and blew out the lamp. It was a rural area, but as she lay there, she saw a light moving slowly, creeping on the opposite side of a small creek. It had first appeared in the vicinity of a cluster of old logging shanties upstream, followed the stream until it reached a small walk log, crossed it, and continued over the hill and disappeared. On the following morning, she related the incident of the moving light to her grandparents, who appeared to show no curiosity. Don't pay that any mind, honey, said the grandmother, and the grandfather too. One's apt to see that light any night. It's a spirit light. The girl asked what that was. You see, the grandfather said, several years ago, a young man was shot in a fracas up yonder at them old logging shacks. Some of his buddies got a lantern and carried him to the creek bank. He begged them to take him back home before the worst could happen. So they carried him across the footlog, up the hill to that fence that you saw, where they stopped, and one held the lantern, while the rest lifted him over the fence. And they took him over that hill, where he unfortunately passed away. Ever since then, one can see that light moving along the same path that they carried him, and stopping at the footlog, before going over the hill. Chapter 89, a portfolio of psychic poetry. The Coffin. This was published anonymously in the March 1840 issue of The Messenger. The coffin is come, 'tis a dreadful sound, and tears are gushing new. It sends a shock to each aching heart, suspending with awe the breath. It says the living and the dead must part, and seems like a second death. Heavy and slow is the bearer's tread, ascending the winding stair, and the steps which are winding over their heads awaken a sad despair. The merciful King of Kings, farewell forever, forever farewell, is heard as the crowds depart, and the piteous accents they seem to swell from a torn and broken heart. That sounds like a gothic poem written by like My Chemical Romance, like the mid-1800s. Chapter 86, a sampling of spectral snippets. At a junkyard in Bassett, northwest of Martinsville, witnesses say they have seen phantom headlights flashing, car doors opening and shutting, radios blaring in the night, and motors from the broken cars. This happens, as it is contended, when the ghosts of those who have passed away return back to their cars.
About Poe's death and how he was a pauper, a penniless pauper walking the streets of Baltimore. This was not true. Ever since Poe, and more frequently in the 20th century, visitors to the Poe house have reported unexplainable experiences and visions. One is a formally dressed woman seen transparently in the same room where Poe wrote his stories.
Haunted Places by Dennis Hawk. District of Columbia, Foxo. A strange ritual is performed regularly by a ghostly presence here. The mansion was built by Henry Foxell, who enjoyed relaxing in the evenings by playing violin music with his good friend, Thomas Jefferson. The haunting started in the 1890s, when the ghost of Foxell's elderly housekeeper started appearing in the third-floor hallway. Whenever her floating apparition was seen, always just before 10, all the lights in the house would suddenly extinguish. The phenomenon continued until the 1950s and included candles, gas lights, and even electric lights. Foxhall is a private residence now, near Dumbarton Avenue, a block away from Wisconsin Ave in Georgetown. Wow. Maryland. Frederick. Frederick Historical Society. Volunteers here have reported seeing a woman wearing a long-sleeved floor-length dress, but is no longer there when you approach her. She has been observed sitting in a velvet rocking chair in a storage room. Old trunks seem to move by themselves, and music is sometimes heard coming from a broken Grafanola machine. The unusual house was built in 1834 by Dr. John Batso. A hanging spiral staircase rises from the ground floor to the roof of the Federal-style building, which is on 24 Church Street in Frederick. Hagerstown, Stanford Hall. A lady in silk, enveloped in a ghostly mist, appears in the first-floor room here. And the apparition of an old moonshiner is said to roll a barrel of whiskey down the front steps late at night. There's also talk of a secret room, which brings disaster to anyone who finds it. Now, the 36-room mansion was built in 1734 by the Mason family. Maryland Governor William Hamilton owned it for nearly 50 years. In 1920, it was bought by the Leo Cohill family, a local magistrate, who found the room in 1924, and one of the Cohill daughters, 9-year-old Margaret, who found the room 2 years later. They're both said to have died by discovering it. Hagerstown is at the intersection of I-70 and I-81 at the Pennsylvania border. Stanford Hall is a private mansion now, 10 miles away from Hagerstown, overlooking Clear Spring. New York, Mohawk Valley, Henderson House. This replica of an ancient Scottish castle is haunted by the stalwart lady that had it built on land that she inherited from her parents. Harriet Douglas Kruger was a hot-tempered woman who once had the bed that she shared with her husband sawed in half to make a point. No one wanted to cross the red-haired lady, a fact which makes it seem odd that her relatives failed to follow her last wishes. When she died in 1870 at the age of 80, she left instructions that she was to be interred in a sarcophagus in the basement of her castle home. One day not long after her passing, her sarcophagus was used as a horse trough, but it was destroyed by a bolt of lightning. The doors started slamming with an angry bang, the way that they used to when she was alive. Things began to go wrong until they're done the way that Aunt Harriet preferred. And to this day, they say that Harriet Douglas Kruger's home is still her beloved Henderson Castle, in a private residence off of I-90 in the Mohawk Valley. Tarrytown, Sunnyside. The ghost of Sleepy Hollow author Washington Irving appears at his former home. Several years after his death in 1859, 3 witnesses saw his apparition walk through the parlor and disappear into his library. His ghost also roamed the stacks of books at the Astor Library in New York City, where he wrote The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Tarrytown is in Westchester County, 10 miles north of New York City, on US Highway 9. Sunnyside's on the Hudson River in Tarrytown. North Carolina, Kadesh Methodist Church. Music comes from the organ here, even when no one is in the church at all, near the South Mountain State Park. Pennsylvania, Merwinsburg. This town is named for the Merwin family, some of whom still haunt the historic inn. Built in 1756, the 3-story house is generally known to be haunted by everyone in the area. White ghosts have been seen in an upstairs bedroom and in the hallway, where music coming from far away and long ago can often be heard at any hours of the day. The town is just off of Highway 115 in western Monroe County. The former inn is now a private residence, known as Merwin's Place. Virginia, Federal Hill. A flamboyant Scottish ghost haunts Federal Hill. He is Alexander Spotswood, the state's governor from 1710 to 1722. Spotswood was responsible for the death of pirate Edward Teach, also known as Blackbeard. We talked about him in Pirate Tales of Virginia from Haunts of Virginia, and he used to haunt a lot of the eastern shore, the Chesapeake Bay, because the English didn't have as strong a naval foothold. By the time that they got into the bay, a lot of Blackbeard's ships could attack them. So they used to stick to the less open water areas and more to the coast. And even then, you'd be in danger from Blackbeard, but not for much longer. Spotswood's ghost started appearing in the stately house in the 1920s, and has been seen many times since then. His appearances are always the same. He suddenly materializes standing next to an old sideboard cabinet. He's dressed in white-plated hunting breeches, tied with a black rope, and seems to be mixing drinks on a tabletop. Go figure. The historic house is a private residence in Charlotte Street in Fredericksburg. For more information, you can contact the Visitor Center. Haunts of Virginia by Pamela K. Kinney. Chapter 32. Pirate Tales of Virginia. Blackbeard's Skull. Author Deborah Painter told me a legend about Blackbeard, the pirate, who was killed off the shores of North Carolina by Alexander Spotswood, and his head brought back to Hampton to be suspended from a pole at Sunset Creek as a warning. To this day, his ghost searches for his head in the Chesapeake Bay. But leave that legend to what you will. Here's another one about Blackbeard in the Old House Woods in Matthews County. Involved with the hauntings of the Old House Woods, said that he killed other pirates burying a treasure there in the 17th century. As for this, go if you dare. But I think there might be some truth to the legend, because he was very adamant about keeping people out of that area, and it was said that he buried treasure in several locations in the bay. That could definitely be one of them. Chapter 33. Native American Legends and Worldviews. The Monacan Indians and the Natural Bridge. According to legend, the Monacan nation discovered the Natural Bridge while under attack by the Algonquin. When they reached the chasm of Cedar Creek and discovered no visible way to cross, they prayed for the Great Spirit to protect them. And just as they arose from their prayer, a 215-foot-tall bridge appeared, the Natural Bridge. The women and children crossed to safety first. The men followed, but not until after they met and defeated the Algonquins. Higher than Niagara Falls, the Natural Bridge is one of the oldest tourist destinations in the United States, Turtle Island. It has been included in several 7 Natural Wonders of the New World list, mainly in the 19th and early 20th centuries. It's a National Historic Landmark, a Virginia landmark, and included in the National Register of Historic Places. 215 feet high. It is 40 feet thick, with the arch having a span of 90 feet. Route 11 still passes over it. As for the bridge itself, it's awe-inspiring, and an incredible feeling overcame me as I visited it. Touching the rock, I imagined and dared to scale up its side. And then, there have been several unsuccessful attempts to locate the underground channels of the Lost River. Colored dyes and flotation devices have been used. All failed to determine the source of the final destinations of this underground river, though there's no doubt it goes from the Natural Bridge caverns to under the bridge itself. The history tells us that it was discovered, the Lost River, around 1812, when men from Saltpeter Cave heard its rushing waters and blasted the opening, attached a water main in there to transport water to hoppers and kettles used to extract nitrate from the cave. So I hope that you enjoyed episode 17 of Haunted Mid-Atlantic Tales. Again, it's a pleasure to spend this time with you and to share the history of Turtle Island, of the world, and perhaps spark the curiosity in the unknown and come to an understanding that there's much that we'll never understand. Till next time, take care of yourself. And I wanted to thank the late Jason Madison for being such a wonderful human being. He passed away a year ago on the 22nd. And this is his incense burner. It's also a dragon with several heads. And I thought it'd be nice to light a candle for their memory. Blessings, and reach out to the people that you care about and know that sometimes they're also reaching out to you in return.